During the question and answer session, I asked him a question about animal agriculture. I said, wait a minute, there is so much land being used for grazing animals. If we just restore the forest on that land, can we not reverse climate change? So I asked him that question, and he immediately turned to Roy Neal, his chief of staff, and he said, how did this guy get in here?
As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm your host, Chrissy Benson. Welcome to the winter months. Hope you're staying warm and cozy wherever you are. And to get a head start on your holiday shopping, make sure to buy lots of copies of the vegan women's fiction novel, Marrying Myself by me, Christine Melanie Benson. It's a fun read with a vegan protagonist, a surprise ending, and a revolutionary self-love message. And it'll plant vegan seeds in the minds and hearts of all your book-loving omnivore friends. You can find it on Amazon and at my website, ChristineMelanieBenson.com. And please make sure to leave a nice review on Amazon. If Amazon notices lots of December sales and new reviews, there's a chance that they'll start marketing Marrying Myself, which will get the word out at a level that neither I nor my publisher could ever manage on our own. It's our best way of normalizing veganism through the arts. On another note, if you've got guest suggestions or questions for our monthly Posse Talk with Jen Hawk, please email them to veganposse.email@gmail.com. And now for this week's episode. Dr. Sailesh Rao is the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit dedicated to healing the Earth's climate. He is an environmentalist by occupation and systems engineer by profession. And to me, this next detail is totally crazy. He invented the protocol for transforming early analog internet connections to more robust digital connections while accelerating their speed tenfold. Now, you may not know what that means, and I don't really either, but the bottom line is that any data accessed on the internet today likely passed through a device implementing the protocol he helped create. More relevant for our purposes, however, Dr. Sailesh Rao is also a human, earth, and animal liberation activist. He promised his granddaughter that the world will be largely vegan before she turns 16 in 2026, so that people will stop eating her relatives, the animals. Quite honestly, to me, with people like him advocating for the vegan cause, I almost think we've got a shot at making that happen. So enjoy this conversation with the brilliant Dr. Sailesh Rao. Sailesh, welcome to the Vegan Posse. Are you ready for the ride of your life?
I am ready anytime.
And you've been all over, so I believe you when you say you're ready because you've been on some wild rides. All right, so you've got a fascinating story, and there's so much I want to ask you about. But first, I'd like to take it back to when you were a kid. So can you talk a little about how you ate growing up? And did you ever think about the animals in our food system?
I grew up a vegetarian.
You did? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were lacto-vegetarians from the time I was born, but we drank milk,
Uh-huh.
but it was not very often either. I mean, we used to have curd every day, yogurt every day,
Mm-hmm.
but it was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit for every child, It wasn't that we had a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when he started drinking coffee, then we had milk with the coffee.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Uh-huh.
That's how.
Yeah.
But uh, milk wasn't available in plenty when I was growing up in India.
Mm.
And
Mm.
but I remember one time overhearing my grandmother talking to my grandfather because we had gone to visit them. So, I mean, my parents used to send all the kids to the grandparents' home for summer vacation.
How many of you were there? How many brothers and sisters do you have?
There were five of us.
Five. Wow.
Yeah. We would go and then we meet up with our cousins there, and so
Uh-huh.
it was a fun time
Yeah.
during summer vacations. And but I think I was around 7 years old at that time, and I don't remember who else was there. Maybe my elder brothers were there, but I don't think my younger brother was there. But I overheard my grandmother tell my grandfather that this particular calf is drinking too much.
Hmm.
He's not leaving any milk for the children. So what do I do? And my grandfather told my grandmother, don't let him drink to his fill. Pull him away after 10 minutes. And as a child, I realized that there was something wrong going on.
Hmm.
But I tried to put it away in the back of my mind
Hmm.
because I thought it was necessary to drink the milk
Hmm.
and to
Hmm.
eat curd and whatnot,
Hmm.
But I think I was feeling guilty about it all along, subconsciously,
Very
because
interesting. Yeah.
because I am, I turns out that I was lactose intolerant. I'm tremendously lactose intolerant, but I didn't know it.
Oh, wow. What symptoms did you have?
Well, I had severe inflammation. I used to get sinus problems all the time, so people thought I was always, always a mucusy kid, right? So,
Hmm.
but it was this. I didn't know this,
Wow.
until I
Wow.
gave up milk um, 16 years ago, and then I discovered that all my inflammation went away. All my
Wow.
arthritic pains went away. So I started jumping up and down when I realized that I no have no more pains.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I'm sure you were happy, but were you also just a little bit resentful that you had been unknowingly perpetuating this on yourself?
I know it's not only me. I was upset that my parents went through the same thing. My
Mm.
dad had arthritis for as long as I can remember.
Hmm.
And maybe it was this, but he passed away, right? Before we could find out. So he was
Amazing.
probably lactose intolerant too.
Right, right. Well, I mean, whenever I hear people talk about being lactose intolerant, my instinctive response and sometimes my out loud response is, well, we're not cows. So we're
Right.
all
Right.
somewhat lactose intolerant. It just shows up more noticeably in certain people and certain
Right.
populations. But,
Right.
we're meant to drink human breast milk, not cow's breast milk. So,
That too,
wow.
only when you're a child, right?
Right. Yeah,
Only when
right.
you're a baby.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. I'm amazed that you absorbed that information though about the cow and just, that you just sensed intuitively that there's something off about that system where a baby couldn't drink to his fill. That's very
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I find it very interesting and very sad too that yeah, that you remember that. It's so funny as kids, the things that we hear and we just accept. We just accept them
I
at face
know.
value. Yeah.
I mean, that's what drives me now is that can we not create a world in which kids don't have to go through this kind of trauma? I mean, as adults, are we not smart enough to create a world like that? So
Right.
that's what drives me. I mean, we need to create a world like that because that's the only way out
Right,
on this
right,
planet.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, obviously. And it's just so interesting to me because life just entails, there's so much suffering that's inherent in life.
Mhm.
And that do we have to create even more?
Right. Yeah.
There's enough that's
Unnecessarily.
already there that's
Right.
unavoidable. And so to perpetuate even more is just really, really just a shame. It's a shame. So
Mhm.
you lived in India and then you went on to become an engineer. And even though
Right.
it's not directly related to the topic of this podcast, I'm just so intrigued because as I understand it, you were involved in the very early stages of developing the internet. Is that right?
Right. Well, not the early stages. Early stages, if you think about it, internet started in the 70s, because it was basically a defense network. And
Oh, right, right.
yeah, they were
Defend,
using
yeah.
it with voice band modems and things like that, right? So it was all data transmission through
Hmm.
modems. And I got involved in the 90s, and my contribution was to convert analog internet connections into digital internet connections. So from analog signal processing, we went to digital signal processing, which
And what does
uh,
that mean?
it means, normally when you do analog signal processing, you look at a signal that comes out of a wire and you make a decision. You do some, whereas in digital signal processing, you take a signal that's coming out of a wire and you first digitize it, turn it
Into
into
zeros and ones,
into zeros
typically?
and ones. It's basically like an 8-bit number or a 10-bit number or whatever. So
Okay.
you sample it and you digitize it, and then you process it digitally. Okay. And then based on that, you can actually get um, much more information from the same signal.
Interesting. So it's the same signal and same information, but you can learn
Right.
more
So
from it.
learn more. Basically, you can get more fidelity out of the information. So,
Oh, okay.
we were able to go from 100 million bits per second to 1 billion bits per second on the
Oh,
same wire.
wow. Oh,
Okay.
wow.
On the same wire, and make it more robust.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's what helped the internet take off,
Wow.
because when you make it more robust, then people are not seeing these, hourglasses like you were experiencing when I got on the screen. Right,
Right, right.
right, on Riverside
Yeah.
FM.
Was
So
that exciting for you? Like
yeah, it
was
was, getting
yeah.
it to work was exciting, right? Because getting it to work and then having people come and tell me, hey, uh, I connected it on your gigabit and it worked like a charm, but the same thing, it doesn't work at 100.
Interesting. And were you in the US by this point? Was it
Yes,
this
I
was
was in the US. Yeah.
okay, okay.
I was basically, I left India after I finished my bachelor's
Hmm.
and I came to the US to do my graduate studies. I did my master's at Stony Brook in Long Island and my PhD at Stanford in California. And I became a specialist in systems,
Okay.
how to build systems that are robust. And
Hmm.
so I worked on the internet as part of my job. So I was working for Bell Labs for 5 years in New Jersey. And then I quit Bell Labs and I started my own company where we were focusing on communications infrastructure, upgrading the communications infrastructure. Because those are the days when people are talking about how to get internet connection on your telephone wires, how to get it on uh, how to connect computers together at fast rates and so on.
Did you ever anticipate the internet becoming what it is today?
I had no idea. I had no clue. I have to tell you that honestly,
So
we
interesting.
were all shocked when it took off so fast.
Wow, wow. So even the people who were working on it didn't realize what it
I
would
had no
become.
clue.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Because remember, in 1996, was it 96 or 95? There was an article in Newsweek saying internet bar. Who's going to buy things on the internet? Who's going to read stuff off the internet? You're crazy. So that was the opinion, right? Because it was slow.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
slow and people didn't have a good experience on it.
Hmm.
So it's only when he made it really fast, then people said, oh, wait a minute, now there is so
Yeah.
much I can do on it. Yeah.
And it sounds like you were one of the people that helped make it fast.
Yeah, well, I, I contributed to it. Yeah.
Yeah, but even you, it's
Yes.
so amazing to me. So what's it like for you? Do you feel like you unleashed a monster or do you feel like you unleashed an
Yeah,
angel?
I did. I mean, I remember, so I stopped working on the internet in 2005 when I saw Al Gore's presentation on TV. And then I started focusing just on climate change. Okay.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So I'm curious about that transition. And also I'm curious because I remember seeing a bit going around the news at one point about Al Gore supposedly claiming credit for the internet.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you, for
Yeah.
inventing it? Did you ever intersect with Al Gore during your computer days, during your
No,
internet
no, no,
days?
no.
No. Okay. Okay. So you
No,
weren't
I
familiar with
think he
him.
basically passed I mean, he was the sponsor of a bill that provided some money for
Okay. Okay.
making this
Okay.
transition happen or something like
Okay.
that.
He's not
Yeah.
an engineer.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
wasn't an engineer.
Okay. So what was the presentation that you saw of his?
It was the presentation that became the documentary An Inconvenient Truth. So I saw it before it became the documentary,
Okay.
and he was basically sharing it to some activists in San Francisco, and
Hmm.
someone had videotaped it and they put it on this public access channel on satellite TV. So I
Wow.
had satellite TV and I was watching it and I saw his presentation and I was so shocked. I told my wife, if half of what he's saying is true, I'm wasting my time. And she
And
told me, if you think it's that important, why don't you look into it? So that's how it started.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like you have a wife who believes in you.
Oh, I have a wife who's very supportive, everything. I mean, perfect partner. Yeah.
So tell me, had you been concerned about the environment before seeing this
No,
presentation? No?
I had no idea how bad things were. So when I started, it was because of climate change. That's what Al Gore was talking about. And then when I started looking into it, I realized it was a complete systems issue. It's one of the most challenging systems problems that I've ever encountered. How do you maintain the life support systems on the planet?
So, for people, obviously most people listening and all of us have heard about some of these issues, but
Mhm.
can you just kind of give a very like grassroots layperson's view of your initial takeaway from this initial presentation that you saw? How would you summarize, the message that you got from that talk?
The message that I got was that the planet was getting too hot and that greenhouse gases were causing the planet to get too hot. Okay. And that we had to do something about it. Okay? So then when I started looking into it, it's not the planet getting hot is the planet having a fever. A fever is always a symptom, it's not the disease.
Interesting. Interesting. Right.
Okay. So the
Right.
disease is our relationship, how, what we have done to the life support systems of the planet, because we think we are here to exploit the planet. We are here to exploit the animals. And in the process of exploiting, we think there is no consequence to it because we are the most powerful species on the planet. But in reality, there is a consequence to it. We have messed up the life support systems of the planet. Okay. And without life support systems, there is no life on the planet. So if you look at the life support systems of the planet, there are 9 planetary boundaries that we have to stay within to ensure that life continues forever, which is what sustainability is about, right? You want life to continue forever, which means you have to stay within the green zone of the life support systems. Of the 9, we have violated now 7 of them.
Wow. Wow.
Okay.
So
7
which
of them.
which are those seven? Tell us the two that are still okay.
The 2 that are still okay, the first one is the ozone hole, the ozone layer. We are closing up the hole now. Remember, that was the first thing that we found in
Yes.
the 90s,
Yes.
and then we managed to close it up. So that one is okay. The second one that's still okay is the amount of particles we put into the atmosphere. These are called aerosols. And these aerosols, they make it difficult for people to breathe or animals to breathe if there is too much of them. So you can suffocate to death if there is too much aerosols in the atmosphere. And there we are not yet there, the point where it's still in the green zone,
Okay.
okay, worldwide. The other 7, it's either yellow, starts off with yellow and then goes all the way to dark red.
Hmm.
Okay. Dark red meaning it's definitely going to kill life as we know it. It's high risk if you leave it there. Okay.
Wow. So how long did it take you from when you saw this presentation and just decided to completely switch careers? I mean, obviously that's a big, big life change for you. It sounds like a career change, even though it sounds like you were bringing a lot of your system skills to this new
Right, right.
path. But I mean, you must have been really deeply affected to make such a shift.
Yeah, it took me 3 months.
3 months, that's still not a long time.
Yeah, in 3 months, I told my wife I'm going to study it. And then 3 months later, I told her we have to shut down our company and
Wow.
focus on it full time.
Wow. What
Then I
did your
wrote to,
colleagues think of this, of you shutting down your company, which I assume had been successful and you had a
right.
reputation and we're on a successful path. So what did people think of this?
Well, it was a shock to my colleagues, and those who were in my company, I spent time to find them jobs and made sure that they had a good smooth transition before I left. Um, but then everyone else thought that I'd gone crazy
Hmm. Hmm.
because I'm no longer working on this at all. I'm working on something else.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever wonder if you were crazy? If you'd somehow gotten it wrong, or like how did you
Mhm.
verify the information?
Well, I'm a systems guy, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to read papers and sort of glean what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah.
And I very quickly figured out that it's far worse than what Al Gore was saying. So my initial reaction of shock only got compounded as I read more and more into this.
Mm.
So I wrote to Mr. Gore and I said, how can I help you? Okay. I immediately wanted to help in any way I can. And I got trained by him in the first batch, the second batch he trained.
Wow. So
And
what
that
year
was
what year was this?
November of 2006.
Wow. Wow.
And I
And
got
what
trained.
was that like? Well, number one, what was it like working with Al Gore? Did you work with him directly?
Yeah, I mean he was giving the presentation, and there were 200 of us listening to him, asking
Wow.
questions and trying to understand how we can deliver the same presentation.
Mm-hmm.
But during the question and answer session, I asked him a question about animal agriculture.
You did. So you were
Yeah,
thinking about this issue.
well, I'm a systems guy, right? So I look at I look at the
Yeah.
data and I say, wait a minute, there is so much land being used for grazing animals.
Right.
If we just restore the forest on that land, can we not reverse climate change? So that was the question I had. So I asked him that question, and he immediately turned to Roy Neal, his chief of staff, and he said, how did this guy get in here?
Really? He
Yeah,
literally said that?
he literally said that.
I mean,
Uh,
it sounds hostile, that
no, no, no.
reaction.
It wasn't hostile. I didn't take it as hostile.
Okay.
I just took it as, oh my God, he's seeing through things type of thing, right? It's
Okay.
like he's seeing
Okay.
through things. And he said something like, we are looking into it and it's not such a serious issue as you think. It's something like that. And then he brushed it off. So then I thought about it and I said, wait a minute. I mean, the data is telling me that this is a solution. It's not only going can halt climate change, it can reverse it.
Well,
The
that's
world
so
gets
interesting. So when did you discover? So it sounds like you came upon that information before you even started training with Al Gore. Is that right? Or what was the
Yeah,
timeline
I
on it?
was reading up papers, and the papers
Okay.
were telling me that it's roughly, at that time they were saying it's one third, one third, one third.
Uh-huh.
One third forests on land, one third grazing land, and one third cities and deserts and mountains and unused land. Okay. That was
Mm-hmm.
the breakup.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that forests, the total amount of carbon on land was 3 times the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And this guy's telling me that carbon in the atmosphere is the problem. And I said, you have one
Interesting.
third grazing land. Can you
Yeah.
not bring trees on that land?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
suck it down, right? So to me, it was just back of the envelope calculations I was doing, right?
Yeah. I mean, was that flabbergasting information for you when you just came upon it? Because
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
it's not talked about, even environmental movements out.
right,
So when you discovered this, and it seems like such an obvious first step,
right.
what did you make of that?
I was saying, why are people so? I mean, I was puzzled as to why people were so making such a big deal of it when there's a simple solution to it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You know, that was the attitude I went with, right? And I was asking him the question. Then
And
he
it's good
said,
news, right? Like
yeah, it's good
like in
news,
many
right?
ways, it's good
Yeah.
news. Yeah.
So he kind of brushed me off. And then I said, okay, maybe there is more I need to study, right? So I went back and started studying all the other things. Then I found out about chemical pollution, the plastic. I mean, there's so much going on, right, on the planet. And then I got more and more convinced that my calculations were correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so I convinced 70 of my colleagues at the Climate Reality Project to co-sign a letter to Al Gore, asking him to get more serious about animal agriculture.
Wow. 70 out of the 200. Did you say there were 200 of you total?
200 in the first batch and in the second batch, and then there were other batches. So it wasn't a big sampling of people. I mean, maybe
Okay, but
we
still
got maybe
significant. Yeah.
significant number of people who said, okay, we need to write him a letter.
Wow,
So,
interesting.
so we wrote him the letter,
Mm-hmm.
and he replied to us. He's saying, I hear you. It's not that I don't know about this. I know about this, and we are talking about this. We are going to do something about this. And but it's not as big a deal as you think it is, or whatever. Something he did a letter that kind of told us, don't worry about it. Continue your work, right?
Hmm.
And we did. And that time, a paper came out in the by the World Watch Institute saying that animal agriculture is responsible for 51% of greenhouse gas emissions. Previously, we thought it was only 18% because that's what the FAO had said in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And here, this paper said, hey, the FAO missed counting this, and they had a whole bunch of things that they didn't count. And if you count it correctly, it's at least 51%. And I was like, what?
Wow. So I'm curious, just with your systems perspective, when you first discovered this information about the dramatic impact of animal ag on the climate and global temperatures, did you equate that to the world going vegan? Like, how did you envision that information affecting what humans do?
Oh, when I discovered the see, I discovered initially the impact of land use. Okay, that's really what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are using 1/3 of the land just to graze animals.
Mm-hmm.
That
Right, which
was
entails cutting down trees,
right,
clearing forests.
right.
Yeah.
And that was shocking to me, right? But then I was looking at the paper because I was a vegetarian, remember? I was
Yes.
thinking that I'm okay. I'm only drinking milk. I'm not eating the beef. I'm not eating the meat, right? So it took me another year. It finally hit me in 2008 that my consumption of dairy was the major issue.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
because dairy is how you convince people to pay for the cow on a daily basis. Because you're paying for milk on a daily basis, so you're paying for the cow on a daily basis. And then when the cow stops giving milk, she's all paid for, and you turn her into cheap beef and cheap leather. So I realized that dairy is the source of all the problems on the planet. Because without dairy, there is no McDonald's. Without dairy, there is no, cheap shoes, right? So I realized that if we didn't have dairy, everybody will be paying for beef as if they're paying for a steak. And it won't be consumed in such large quantities anymore.
Mm.
Okay. So the entire industry will shrink if there is no dairy. This is why dairy is being propped up by governments.
Right. And even amongst populations like you were brought up in, where
Right.
you were taught that dairy is the thing that's okay.
Right.
Like
Even though
like
60 to 80% of Indians are lactose intolerant. I
right.
mean, you're not
Right.
supposed
It's
to be drinking
it's a
this milk.
massive, yeah, ridiculous scheme that's kind of
It's a,
being
it's a, yeah,
thrust on people.
it's a con
Yeah.
game that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big con job that's going on. And so I realized that. And so I went vegan on the spot, when I discovered that in 2008.
And were you married at the time? Did you have a
Yeah, yeah.
family? Yeah. And what did they make of this? Because that's one thing I'm always interested in hearing is how going vegan affects people's personal relationships.
You know, at that time, we were taking care of my mother-in-law. So my wife and I had moved to California to take care of her mom, who just had a stroke. And we were basically, she couldn't cook anymore. So we were cooking for her. And my mother-in-law and my wife, they have a mother-daughter relationship. So my mother-in-law used to find fault with everything my wife cooked in. So, but she would not find fault with anything that I cooked. So my wife told
Why
me,
was that? She just was especially fond of you, or you just
I
were on
think
a
so.
pedestal?
Yeah. So one time my wife cooked something and gave it to her mom and said, Sailesh cooked it. And she said, oh, it tastes so good. And she said, that's it. I'm not going to cook for you anymore. So anyway, I became the cook in the family, right?
And you were cooking without dairy. I assume you were
Then
cooking
I started
vegan.
cooking without dairy and everybody was eating whatever I was cooking, right? So my wife said, if you cook, I'll eat it. And my mother-in-law had no choice but to eat what I was cooking, right? So, and she became vegan, right? Because of that. My mother-in-law became vegan. And then slowly all her diabetes medication went down. We could see that happening
Wow.
within a year. I
Wow.
mean, most of her diabetes medication went down.
Wow.
Her
Wow.
blood pressure medication went down. Um, but then she still was paralyzed on one side because the stroke didn't had done that to her.
Had done damage. Yeah.
Yeah, done damage
Wow.
to her.
Wow. Well, how was it for you learning to live without dairy and learning to cook without dairy? I mean, I
At
assume.
first I thought I'm going to have trouble making this happen because I love my cheese pizza and I love my milk sweets. So I used to make pedas at home and all that, so milk sweets at home. So how am I going to deal with this? And then I said to myself, I'm going to give myself a week to do it. Okay? I learned how to make soy yogurt with soy milk.
Mm-hmm.
And we were making that at home. And then, um, I think a week after I went vegan, I made a dish with soy yogurt, which I normally make with yogurt. It's a traditional dish that my mother-in-law taught me how to make. Okay, it was from her region of India because she's from Gujarat and I come from Karnataka. It's a different region. So
Mm.
anyway, she has her own special dishes, and she had taught me how to make her dish. And she asked me to make that dish. And I made it with soy yogurt. And she told me, this is the best version you have ever made.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
said, that's it.
No excuses anymore. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That must have been such immense validation for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I realized, oh my God, this is awesome. She loves it too.
Wow.
So
Wow.
then I knew that, I can do this. And because I knew that there was vegan cheese available for cheese pizza, and there were other sweets I could eat. I don't have to eat milk sweets only, So pretty soon I
What
became,
are milk sweets, by the way? Is that a special candy or something?
well, there are so many versions of milk sweets that we make in India. It's just sugar and milk, and you boil the milk like crazy until it thickens.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Kind of like a caramel type
Yeah. And then you add things
consistency.
to it. So
Yeah.
peda is made with um, condensed milk and milk powder and um, ghee.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. So you made this change in a week. Your whole family went vegan because did you have kids too at that time?
Yeah, but our kids were out of the house at the time.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's
Okay.
basically us. And my
Yeah.
wife was not yet vegan in the sense that she would eat outside.
Hmm.
But then, within, I don't know, a couple of years, I noticed that she wasn't ordering anymore. So
So
she became
you
vegan.
didn't push anything on her. You didn't try
Mm.
to persuade. Yeah.
No, I didn't want to persuade her.
But you did all the cooking. So
Right,
that was
right,
probably the biggest thing. So
right.
what about all your colleagues and the people you were working with in your new company? So tell me, explain, did you start your new organization, Climate Healers, at that time?
Yeah.
In your life?
Yeah, I started it in 2007.
Okay.
And
And what exactly were you doing?
initially we were doing, solar lights and solar cookers. And the solar lights, the idea was let's make some impact.
Hmm.
Let's start by making some impact on climate change. And then I started working on solar cookers. But, by 2010 or 2011, within 3, 4 years, I realized that going vegan is the number one issue. That's the number one way to solve the problems, right? Because it wasn't just climate change. See, by 2009, there was a paper that came out saying that there were three planetary boundary transgressions. So there were three different, climate change was the smallest one. And then there was nitrogen and phosphorus loading. And then there was biosphere integrity, meaning the loss of wild animals. And these were the three major violations.
Interesting, because we hear a lot about global warming and climate change, but we don't often hear it parsed out in those different categories.
Yeah, even within climate change, we only hear about fossil fuels. We don't hear about animal agriculture, which is the bigger part, actually.
Right, right. And it's so interesting, yeah, because I remember years ago when I was working at a law firm and I had a colleague who was Korean, so she was probably even lactose intolerant. But I remember her saying to me, if only they would tell us something tangible, something practical we could do to help with climate change, because I would be willing to keep my thermostat at, 70 degrees or 68 degrees. Like if only they would just give us something specific we could do. And I told her, well, there is something specific you can do. You can go vegan, you can eat plant-based, she wasn't interested in that, information. Yeah. So how did you feel about this cause that you'd undertaken, just about the mission of just trying to educate people and convince them to change how they eat?
No, initially, I was just looking at it as a problem I'm trying to figure out how to solve. Right? So it was to me, it was an engineering problem. How do you solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
Because as soon as we admit that we are changing the climate of the planet, and we are impacting all these life support systems of the planet, we are responsible for maintaining the life support systems of the planet. And that is an engineering task. Okay. It's like you're flying a spaceship now, right? So you need to know how to make sure that the controls, what are the limits of the controls on the spaceship? And how do you stay within those limits? And that's how I was looking at it. I really didn't become very serious about this until my granddaughter held my feet to the fire and said, "It's your job to solve the problem." So anyway, that was 2016. Yeah.
Wow. How old was she at the
She was
time?
5 at that time.
She was 5?
Yeah.
And she was holding your feet to the fire on climate change?
Absolutely, she did.
What did she say, and how did she even hear about this issue?
I wrote a book about it. It's called The Pinky Promise. And basically, it's I was just reading her a story. My job was to put her to bed, and that evening, I had just read the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet report, which said that between 1970 and 2012, we wiped out 58% of all wild animals on the planet in terms of total weight. And just 2 years ago, it had said between 1970 and 2010, it was 52%. So 52% will become 58% in 2 years. So I knew that if you do an extrapolation of that, we're going to hit 100% by 2026. Okay. And I was shocked, I thought, my God, why isn't everybody tearing the hair out, doing something about this?
Right.
So that was in my mind. And then I read her a story. And then at the end of the story, she put her head on my shoulder and she said, "Grandpa, who were the first human beings?" And I promised her that I'll never, ever lie to her. So I said, "I'm going to explain to you how evolution works. So imagine that you're standing on the street and you're holding your mother by your hand. And you ask your mother to bring her mother to stand by her side and so on. So you create a long line of mothers on this side of the street. And on the other side of the street, you ask a chimpanzee to do the same thing with her mother and her grandmother and so on. When these two lines go from Phoenix to Tucson, they will merge. Because both lines are going to say, "Hey, that's my mama too."
What a great way of explaining it. Had you thought of this analogy before, or did you just come up with that on the spot?
I came up with it on the spot but I was calculating, assuming 2 feet per person and 20 years per generation in 100 million years. I mean,
Wow,
this,
you
this,
clearly have a mathematical mind.
yeah. And then 5 million years, how long of a line it would be, that sort of thing.
Wow. It's very impressive. Very impressive.
Right. So, so immediately she sat up in bed. She said, "What? Are you telling me that animals are my family?" And I said, "Yeah, now that you put it that way, they are your family." And she said, "Then why are people eating my family?"
She said that.
Yeah.
She said those words.
And then Grandpa make them stop. She was bawling. She was naming names of people she knows who were eating her family. I was literally watching her getting traumatized. Just like I got traumatized at the age of 7, right? I was watching her get traumatized. And, it was heart-wrenching for me because to me, it's, why do children have to go through this
Right.
again and again and again, right? I've
Right.
gone through it. And I'm sure
Right.
every child goes through it when they find out
Right.
something's wrong. So, um, so then, I tried to console her and I said, Kimaya, this is what I do. It's my job to make them stop. Immediately she stopped crying. She said, this is your job? You haven't done your job? Then she shook her finger in my face, said, do your job. How can I say no to that? And then she
Wow.
said, when will you do your job? And I blurted out, I better do it by 2026, otherwise we are in big trouble.
Wow. Wow.
And she said, will you promise me that? I said, okay, I'll promise you that. I said, will you give me a pinky promise? I said, okay, I'll give you a pinky promise. And then she said, you can. So she asked me to show her my pinky. And then she locked her pinky in mine and she said, you can never, ever break a pinky promise. Right? And at that point, I realized I'd made a very, very serious promise.
Hmm.
And on behalf of my generation to
Hmm.
her generation,
Hmm.
that we are going to solve this problem. Right? And, this is why, I've been at it now for 8 years. I have only 2 years left to
I was
finish
gonna
the job.
say, how are you doing on that on that
So
trajectory?
I calculated that we are going to hit 100% by 2026. But it turns out that by 2020, we had killed 73% of all wild animals. So by 2024, it's at 85%. So we have killed 85% of wild animals. But that's my extrapolation based on the 73%. And I believe by 2026, we'll be at 91%. Now, it's like a fire in your home, okay? If you have a fire in your home, you don't say, do I have 2 hours to put it out? Maybe I'll take a break for 2 hours and then come back and put it out. You don't do that. It's just we haven't realized that there's a fire in our home. Okay. And people are just walking around like zombies, not knowing that there's a fire in our home.
Right, right. Well, of course, part of why they're walking around like zombies is that they're consuming these so-called foods that just make them numb and sick and unable
Right.
to be fully aware of what's going on around them. So that just kind of perpetuates the whole cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally, I think that's a good explanation for what's going on. Because if I look at the life support systems of the planet, the 9 boundaries, and I told you we have crossed 7 of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
The least violated, the one that we just crossed this year. So I've been looking at it every year, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
papers have been coming out every now and then. So in 2009, there were 3 boundaries we crossed. By 2015, it was 4. But then each crossing has now gotten bigger.
Mm.
And by 2023, it was 6. And every crossing has gotten bigger. And this year, they just announced that we have crossed the 7th one. Okay. And they're all getting bigger. So to me, it's like 7 alarms.
Right.
So there's
Right.
one big fire on the planet. There's a 7 alarm fire going on the planet.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
And the beauty of it, the good news He said, if the world goes vegan, you silence all 7 alarms.
Hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
It
That
is.
there is
Yeah,
one
it is
solution
amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
that
One
addresses all 7 of
solution.
them.
Right, right. Unfortunately, it's the one solution that a lot of people just are very resistant to doing.
Well, I mean,
What do
look,
you, so you've, I mean, you've really just, you haven't stayed in any particular lane professionally. You've really pushed all knowable limits. You know, you've written books, you've produced films. I mean,
right.
I get the sense that you're just open to doing whatever you think will help and
Right.
whatever it takes. What's that been like? How did you come to write the books that you've written about climate change?
Well, the first book I wrote in 2010. I mean, started writing in 2010, 2011, right? Is when I finished writing it. And it literally poured out of me. And that was after I saw my granddaughter for the first time. And I just wanted to write down everything I know. So in case I get hit by a bus, it's there, right? And I called it Carbon Dharma, the occupation of butterflies. And I used the analogy of humans going from a caterpillar phase to the chrysalis and into the butterfly phase. And the transition from caterpillar to chrysalis is happening now. That was the imagery I was using. And then, basically you have to now think about your consumption. As a caterpillar, you consume mindlessly. Now you're forced to think about your consumption because there are lots of life support systems being impacted. And then as you think about your consumption, you will become a butterfly, which will restore the planet. It will restore the life support systems on the planet. It will restore the biodiversity of the planet. Okay?
So if the world went vegan today,
Mhm.
how long would it take for these systems to heal, for things to
It'll
rejuvenate?
start, it'll start healing right away. Nature is a self-healing system.
Right.
Okay? There are so many mechanisms in nature for health self-healing, just like our bodies, right? As soon as
I
we
was
start
going to
putting the
say
right,
the exact same thing. Like our bodies are always healing, or trying to heal at
right,
least. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just start putting the right food in it and
Right.
right oxygen, breathe in, and do the right thing, the body heals, right? In the same way, nature is self-healing system, and we don't have to sit still. We start doing the right thing, and then we can start helping
Mm-hmm.
with the intention of restoring nature. Right now, we go to nature and interact with the intention of extracting from nature, because that's how the economy is set up, right?
Right.
I realized that we have to change the economic objectives. What is the objective of an economy today? It is to grow itself and to extract from nature. That is the economy of a caterpillar. For the chrysalis, you need to stop growing. You need to start using whatever you already gotten. Okay. And you need to then start thinking about how are you going to fix the problem. So I say that we need to create a different economic objective, which is to restore the ecosystems of the planet.
Hmm. And how, I mean, that sounds like a monumental paradigm shift.
It's a paradigm shift, but to me as a systems engineer, it's just this instead of this system, you go to this system. It's not that hard, right?
Right, right, right. Using soy yogurt in the recipe instead of instead of
Right.
dairy yogurt.
It's a different system altogether. See the system in a system you're playing. You have some rules. You have
Mm-hmm.
some so you set up, you tell some stories and you play some games. And the main games we play today is the game of money.
Mm-hmm.
And the game of money is designed for extraction, as it is. It's designed for extraction from the planet. Because in the game of money that we are playing today, there is always more debt than money. And the debt has to be returned by extracting from the planet and creating an object that can be sold so that money flows back to the people who gave you the debt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So It's a it's a game that is designed for extraction. So if you ask me, how would you design a game for restoration? I know the rules. You just have to create a flow from the bottom up, not in terms of debt, but in terms of allowances. So you have to get rid of this entire debt-based mindset, right? So it's a different game you have to play. And I'm saying, why can't we create that game and play both games for a while? And then you say, okay, I like this game better than that game. Move over.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I do think that sort of attitude and that sort of mentality is more effective than applying these, rigid constructs that you tell people, you have to do this. Just making things into more of a game, an experiment, just an option. Let's just try this, see how it
Right.
goes. Yeah. So what was it like helping produce the documentaries that you've helped with? I believe there was Cowspiracy and What the Health. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. The first documentary I helped produce was called The Human Experiment. And it's on Unchained TV. You can watch it on Unchained TV if you want.
Great.
And,
How was it producing a movie?
you know, I thought it would have such a, I mean, when I started, I had no idea, okay, how, what to do. I was writing books. I wrote a book and then I was waiting for people to say, oh, wow, now we know what to do.
Right, right, right.
But hardly anybody read the book. It's like maybe 1,000 copies, 2,000 copies, right? And and then I was looking at how do we reach lots more people? And this opportunity for a documentary came. Okay. And I just invested some money in it and it got on Netflix. And suddenly millions of people were watching it. Okay. The Human Experiment. I said, okay, this is how you reach millions instead of thousands.
Yeah.
So then we did Cowspiracy. I mean, Cowspiracy just landed in my lap. It was already
Really?
done. Yeah. And I got an email from the makers, Kip and Keegan, that they need support for bringing it to the public. So I looked at uh, the trailer
Mm-hmm.
and I told them, "Hey, this is exactly my story." Because I felt that because Al Gore's team was doing exactly the same thing to me,
Uh-huh.
okay,
Uh-huh.
pretending it's not happening, right? So can you let me see the full picture? Then I can come in, with more money. So initially, I think donated $500 or something, and then I said I could come with more money. So they let me see the whole picture, and then I said, "That's it, I'm in." But I had to convince my wife because my wife thought we're going to get sued and we're going to get dragged into lawsuits and all that, So,
Interesting. Who did she think was going to sue?
well, Howard Lyman got sued by the meat industry.
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she was basing her fears on that. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. Wow.
So that's the reason for suing people, right? So to chill any more discussions on
Yeah.
this topic.
Yeah. That chilling
So I said, okay,
effect.
now we
Yeah.
have to take a chance, So we put our money into it, and we took a chance with what Cowspiracy. Fortunately, nobody sued us. I think if they had sued us, it would have blown up in their faces.
Right.
I
Right.
think they know
Agreed.
that
It would
now.
have backfired. Yeah.
Yeah. Then What the Health, we put our money into that, um, and then lots of other movies, we got involved in because I realized it was the best way to reach a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I'm looking at how to do a fictional movie. So
Really?
yeah, because I
Have
can
you
reach
have
more.
you written the screenplay or what's the story going
It's
to
being
be?
written as we speak. Yeah.
Are you writing it or somebody
No, no, no,
else?
no, no. I'm not good at that.
Oh,
I know
I'm
my
very,
limitations.
very interested. Will this be like science fiction or a feature? Like, can you?
No, it's sort of loosely based on the book, but it's more
Uh-huh.
more fictional characters
Yeah.
and
Will it be your story?
not quite.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes elements from my story, so but it'll be there are elements there that didn't happen to me. So
Very interesting. That's really cool. Again, I love it that you're just branching out into completely new realms
yeah, because
just to
if you have
see
to
what
reach
happens.
billion, how do you do that, right? You
Right,
know how to reach millions with
right, right.
uh, yeah, to reach billions, you need to do something different.
So, tell me this, Sailesh, we've got just a few minutes left. And it's such a fascinating story, and obviously the problem still isn't solved. I mean, it's solved in the sense that we know what to do, but it's
Right.
not solved in the sense that people are not doing it. Or are they? How do you see things going?
No, I see things going, as they should, as I was expecting them, because there'll be more and more resistance from the other side, when they
Mm-hmm.
realize that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's their end times for that way of living. It's the end times, right?
Mm.
So the
Right.
American way of life is going to end. This way of consumerism, profligate consumerism, where we throw things away, the throwaway culture, the plastic everywhere. I mean, that's going to end. Whether we like it or not, it's going to end. Okay, either we all die off and it ends, or we consciously end it and we clean up the mess we made. Okay? And I prefer
Right.
we do the latter.
Right. Right.
Right?
So for us, I mean, a lot of the people listening to this right now and watching this are vegan. And
Mm.
so what would you suggest to them? I mean, is there
Right.
anything that you would recommend other than eating vegan?
Oh, no, there is so much we can do. Because to
Okay.
me, going vegan is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And there is always something more that you can do, one more thing you can do to reduce your impact on the planet and increase what you're contributing to the planet. Because ultimately, we have to reach a point where we are routinely giving more to the planet than taking from the planet. And only then will the planet start thriving, right? So I say to, I have lots of things to improve. So every one of us has something to improve. So we are starting a campaign called One More Thing. Do one more thing. We want to launch it during the holiday season so that people can make that resolution. I'll do one more thing every week.
And what kinds of things are on this list?
So we will list, we have a list of things that you can do. Like, if you're vegan, then try to improve your health. Go exercise daily, exercise regularly, meditate, or you can go whole food plant-based, no oil, you know, so that you get healthier and healthier. Because I call this the oxygen mask rule. The vegans have to become healthy
Right.
for us to convince others to come along.
Right.
Okay? Because they're all
Right.
diseased, they're all sick. We were all sickened by the system.
Right.
We're all
Right. That's a good
disease-free
way of
system.
looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's in my own activism, whether it's health activism or animal rights activism. I really do my best to just put the blame on the system. Yes, we're all individuals and we all, need to take accountability and personal responsibility, but at the end of the day, we are going to be affected by the systems that we live in. And so rather than, blame people for eating meat, just,
right,
just remind people we were conditioned into this. It was
right,
thrust upon us. We didn't have any say in what we ate as kids. And now we do. Now we have
right.
more information and we get to make better choices. So it's an opportunity. It's not blaming people, but it's just, yeah, sparking seeds of consciousness. I mean, I'm curious because you seem pretty cheerful and happy. I mean, what is your mindset and what is your emotional landscape? Just being aware of this just massive critical juncture where we are as
Mhm.
humans. How do
Right.
you how do you live with all of that?
Well, I had a fire in my home back in 93 and 1993. And um, 10 minutes or 5 minutes before I was aware of the fire, if you had tapped me on the shoulder and said, in 10 minutes, you're going to be running out of the house in your pajamas, I would have told you you're crazy.
Huh.
But
Wow.
I
So
was
that
running out of the
seven
house in
alarm
my pajamas.
fire, it was
Yes.
is an analogy that really. Yeah,
Yes.
you have personal experience with. Wow, what was it to do with the wildfires in California, or what was the?
No, it was a fire caused by a car, a brand new
Oh,
car that I bought the previous night. I parked it in my garage, and the next morning it caught fire.
oh my goodness.
And it was
Wow.
a known flaw.
Oh,
And
what?
but it was known. It was a known engineering
Oh, I
flaw,
see.
and the dealer
Wow.
didn't tell me that
Wow.
there was a flaw.
Wow.
But it would
Wow.
happen on rare occasions, So he thought it may not happen to me, so he didn't tell me. But it happened to me. So I was the eighth car. My car was the eighth car that caught fire like that. And the manufacturer was waiting for 10 cars to catch fire before issuing a recall.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, so
And so it set your whole house on fire.
it set the entire garage and the room over the garage. And, by the time the fire department put the fire out, my entire house was black on the inside and all our clothes had to be basically thrown away. It's
Oh,
full
that
of
sounds
soot.
so scary. Was it, what time of day was it that it
It was
happened?
early so in the morning.
And did it happen all at once, or was it kind of a slow building fire
No,
that took
no.
you a
See,
while
by
to
the time
notice?
we figured out that there was a fire in the garage, I mean, the car was already on fire, and the boxes in front of the car were on fire. I mean, it was,
So
I
you just
mean,
had to get out. Yeah.
yeah, as
In
soon
your
as I discovered
pajamas, like
my
you said.
job was, my thought was it's going to blow and I better get
Wow.
out of here.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So I assume that was kind of just, was that, how did that experience affect you? Just a wake up call in general of
It was a
time is
wake
of
up
the
call.
essence. Hmm.
No, it was a wake up call to me on how corporations behave.
Hmm. Interesting.
Because
Interesting.
not only did I mean, they knew it was a known flaw. I spoke to the engineer within the corporation who told me it was a known flaw, and he had been studying it in the lab. And but then the headquarters pretended it wasn't their problem. It wasn't their fault, even though they counted it as number 8 in their ledger books, right?
Right, right. Because it wasn't going to be their fault until 10 people had been hurt.
Now, even then, they claimed it wasn't their car, but everybody else who had bought the car, they asked them to bring it back, and they issued a recall to fix the problem.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, but they kept insisting it's not their car that caught fire. So I realized this is how corporations work.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's secrecy, and there is trade secrets, and then they don't tell you things, and then
Yeah.
they try to pull a fast one on you and try to get
Right.
your money out of you, and it's
Right.
like,
I don't know if you ever saw a documentary called The Corporation. Are you
I've
familiar with
seen it.
that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that was enlightening to me, and it basically compared corporations to sociopaths. Corporations and their entity characteristics are identical to all the symptoms of a narcissist and a sociopath.
It's
Just
not their fault. That's how we have organized it.
that's how they're organized.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we
Exactly.
as a
In fact,
society
they're
agreed
legally
to,
required, yeah, to
yeah,
conduct
to behave
themselves
like a
that way.
sociopath. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so that's when you realize that, yeah, it's not just trying to make corporations care more. It's a systemic shift
Right.
that's required in the
Yeah.
system. Very interesting. So I assume you made it out of that situation okay, that you
Yeah.
weren't injured in the fire and your wife was okay and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. We were fine. Our 2 children were there with me at that time, and my wife
Wow.
was not at home. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So you've been through a lot. So you've kind of been in the trenches in many ways. I know you've traveled all over the world and seen lots of different worlds and different ways of life. And so you certainly have experience to, see what people are dealing with and what these changes look like on a very basic, tangible level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it's we have to get rid of this uh, starvation-based model for labor recruitment, which is what we have today.
Hmm.
because 800 million people are being starved deliberately, in my opinion, in order to make sure that they do work that no one else would do. And 8
Right.
million people die of hunger-related causes every year. Okay. This is how we are running a factory farm on the planet.
Right. Right.
And using
Right.
this starvation-based model for
Right.
labor recruitment. And that's got to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And it's very interesting to hear you describe it and all these parallel systems and all these comparable systems. It's once you start to see the playbook, you start seeing the playbook just at work in all these different sectors and in the bigger picture and the smaller picture. That was my own experience as a vegan. And I remember going to a talk by somebody who had written an expose of Tyson Foods, and he was talking about the exploitation of the farmers and the people and just the suffering and the starvation tactics and of course to me as a vegan it was just so apparent, well, they practice this system by exploiting the birds and exploiting the land and exploiting the soil. And then, of course, that exploitation is going to translate to the humans in the system as well. So, yeah, very interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this experience and for just keeping that promise to your granddaughter. I hope we can all, contribute and do one more thing to help this butterfly transition happen. The only concerning thing to me about that butterfly transition is that butterflies have a very short lifespan. So I'm a little concerned that we'll make this glorious transition into butterflies, and then our time will be beautiful, but it will be.
The entire thing, if you think about 4 billion years of evolution that brought us to where we are, and then the caterpillar phase that we are in, we have actually done something amazing. We've heated the planet so that the planet can never go back to another ice age again. So you've ended the fifth major ice age in the Earth's history. That's something to celebrate, right? That we have done that. And now as part of that, now we have to stabilize the climate and keep it there for as long as we want. And so our job is to stabilize it and give it to our children and our grandchildren and say, this is your job to maintain it. And this is how you can maintain it, right? So give them the know-how and the wherewithal to do it.
Right, right. Well, of course, that's thanks to people like you who are bringing this information to the world. So we'll include all the information on climate healers and all of your projects and films and books in our show notes. And thank you so much for just sharing your story. It's been fascinating to talk to you and just hear your firsthand account. I mean, you really have a unique glimpse into this world of science that many of us just are a little intimidated by. So thank you for just, giving us that window. And the final question that I have for you, which I like to ask all my guests, is there a particular word that for you sums up what being vegan is all about?
Love.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. I think that sums it up. And I can, as you talk and as you talk about your family and as you talk about the climate, I can feel the love. So thank you for that, and thank you for sharing it with all of us. And we close every episode by taking 30 seconds of silence for all of the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So Sailesh, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Sailesh, and thank you, Posse. See you next time. Until then, stay strong and stay true.
Bye.